In October 1992, Yoshihiro Hattori knocked on the wrong door. Yoshi, a 16-year-old Japanese exchange student, and his friend Webb were en route to a Halloween party in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. When they got lost along the way, Webb explained to the police, "I wasn't very familiar with that part of town, and I made a couple of navigation errors." Both boys, dressed in Halloween costumes, believed they had arrived at the correct location. However, this innocent mistake had devastating consequences, resulting in Yoshi losing his life. This incident sparked intense media attention and subsequently led to a significant campaign aimed at reforming America's gun laws. Now, 27 years later, Yoshi's parents, the family that hosted him in the US, and a lawyer from Louisiana reflect on the day that forever altered their lives. Before we move on to the meat of the deets, be sure to take a few moments to tell us about how you feel about gun laws in the US in the comments below. Under the Louisiana sun, Yoshihiro Hattori prepared for another day in America. Yoshi had come a long way from his initial reluctance to leave Japan, but the allure of adventure had gripped his heart. Yoshi's journey began when he passed a test for the American Field Service, AFS. His parents, Masa and Mieko Hattori, watched with pride as their son's eagerness grew. Arriving in Dallas, Yoshihiro was warmly welcomed by the Haymaker family, who would be his hosts in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. At McKinley High School, he quickly won the hearts of his peers with his grace and charm, akin to that of a dancer. With his newfound friend Webb Haymaker, Yoshihiro enjoyed the vibrant American life. Together, they attended a blues festival and made more friends. Life was an adventure, and they embraced it fully. As October rolled around, an invitation arrived, one that would forever change the course of events. A Halloween party beckoned from the northeastern part of Baton Rouge, in the city of Central. Little did they know that this invitation would lead to a nightmarish tragedy, shattering the cheerful day with unimaginable darkness and sorrow. "We're here for the party." On Saturday, October 17th, while Dick and Holly went to watch a movie, Yoshi and Webb set off for the Halloween party. Yoshi had dressed up as John Travolta from Saturday Night Fever. Webb was dressed as an accident victim, wearing a neck brace due to a previous swimming pool injury that summer, along with some bandages for added effect. As they searched for the party house, they eventually arrived at a street that seemed promising. It had Halloween decorations, 3 cars in the driveway, and an address of 10,311, even though they were looking for 10131. However, they mistakenly assumed they had found the correct location due to the similar addresses, saying, "Oh, this must be it." Webb and Yoshi knocked on the door but received no response. They then observed a woman opening the side garage door briefly, glancing at them, and abruptly closing it without saying anything. "We were walking away, feeling somewhat confused. I had started to head down the block, wondering if we were at the wrong house," Webb recalled. But then, someone opened the door. It was Rodney Pierres who opened the door. Rodney Pierres, a 30-year-old butcher who worked at a supermarket, was holding a .44 Magnum revolver. Yoshi turned back toward him. Yoshi was very eager to get to the party and didn't seem to realize that Pierres had a gun. "Maybe he thought it was part of the Halloween theme," Webb explained. He remained light on his feet and cheerfully exclaimed, "We're here for the party. We're here for the party," displaying a sense of happiness. Pierre shouted freeze, but Yoshi appeared not to comprehend and continued moving forward. Pierres fired one shot, striking Yoshi in the chest, and slammed the door shut. Before we discuss the aftermath of this tragedy, do help us out by leaving a like and subscribing to follow our weekly content release. There's been a terrible accident. On the other side of town, the Haymakers were leaving the movie theater after watching The Last of the Mohicans. Holly commented to Dick as they exited the film, saying, "It's reassuring that our country isn't as violent as portrayed in the movie anymore." As they were walking away from the theater, Holly's pager went off, and she returned the call. It turned out to be the police on the other end of the line. The officer informed her that Webb was safe, but there was concerning news about Yoshi. Though the officer stumbled over his name, Holly informed the police that they would meet them at the hospital, but the officer responded, "That won't be necessary." In a hurry, Dick and Holly rushed to the police station, where they found Webb sitting alone, unaware of what had happened with his friend after the ambulance had left. It was then that his parents had to break the devastating news to him. Dick recalled, the first words that came out of his mouth were, "His poor mother." That marked the beginning of the tragic events that would deeply affect the Hattori family. Yoshi's parents received the heartbreaking news from a staff member associated with the exchange program. Mieko, his mother, retreated to her son's childhood bedroom, overwhelmed with grief and shedding tears. One of your neighbors, 2 days following the tragic incident, the Hattori family flew to New Orleans. Holly vividly remembered her fear, saying, "I was terrified. I was entrusted with their son's care, and yet he met with this unfortunate fate." Remarkably, the Hattoris were not preoccupied with their own concerns but rather expressed genuine worry for the well-being of the haymakers. The first words Yoshi's mother uttered were, "How is Webb?" Yoshi's shooting quickly garnered worldwide attention, becoming a shocking news story that reverberated across Japan. Masa and Mieko Hattori wasted no time and initiated a campaign in Japan, advocating for stricter regulations on firearm accessibility in the United States. "We commenced the petition drive right after the wake," they explained. Mieko drafted the campaign outline while on the flight from Louisiana back to Japan. Back in Baton Rouge, the trial of Rodney Pierce attracted substantial media attention, turning into a sensation. Initially, the police had released Pierce without charges, presuming that he was acting within his rights by shooting an intruder. However, following protests from Louisiana's governor and Japan's consul in New Orleans, Pierce was eventually charged with manslaughter. Pierce's legal team made considerable efforts to present his actions as an act of self-defense. They argued that Pierce was not a murderer but rather an ordinary neighbor who reacted to Yoshi's unusual and erratic movements. On the other hand, Bonnie Pierce, Rodney's wife, who opened the door, testified in court that Yoshi had frightened her, prompting her to instruct her husband to retrieve the gun. The defense's arguments proved effective. In May 1993, Rodney Pierce was found not guilty after a mere 3-hour deliberation by the jury. Masa Hattori attended the trial and had to hear descriptions of his son as an out-of-control, hyperactive Japanese exchange student who thought his job was to scare people. However, he and his wife remained undeterred in their advocacy for stricter gun control measures. "We believe that Pierce is also a victim of the issues within America," Masa and Mieko asserted. "The acquittal of Rodney Pierce is unrelated to our campaign for gun control." An old roommate of Bill Clinton, the Hattori's petition drive gained significant momentum, eventually amassing around 1.7 million signatures from Japanese citizens. Yoshi's story dominated the front pages and news broadcasts in Japan for several weeks. To support the Hattoris, Dick Haymaker also initiated a signature collection effort in the United States, resulting in approximately 150,000 written signatures being received by mail. Holly noted that Dick dedicated an entire year to this petition drive, emphasizing that this took place before the era of email, the internet, Facebook, or other digital means. Thus, the campaign relied heavily on telephone calls and traditional mail correspondence. Dick immersed himself in gun control activism, starting with the petition drive and then extending his efforts to Washington. "Initially, my focus was on the petition drive, and I devoted my life to it. Later on, I channeled my energy into advocacy in Washington, and eventually, I managed to secure an appointment with the president," Dick recounted. Both families traveled to Washington in November 1993 as part of their campaign. They had gained recognition from their appearances on all 3 major network morning shows. After months of effort, they finally succeeded in delivering a note from Mieko to a family friend who happened to be staying at the White House, an individual who had been a former roommate of Bill Clinton's. President Clinton held a meeting with the Haymakers and the Hattoris in the Oval Office, and the Hattoris expressed that they felt welcomed during the meeting. They believed that President Clinton understood their stance on gun control and shared their desire for stricter gun control laws. Despite the president's personal support, both the Hattoris and the Haymakers acknowledged that there were limited practical steps he could take to assist their cause. Their campaign had a positive impact on the proposed gun control measures. During that same month, Congress passed the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, which mandated background checks for gun buyers and a 5-day waiting period for all gun purchases. President Clinton signed this bill into law shortly after meeting with the Hattoris and Haymakers. The following summer, in September 1994, Congress passed the Federal Assault Weapons Ban, a 10-year suspension on the manufacture of certain semi-automatic weapons for civilian use. Dick Haymaker asserted that they weren't directly responsible for the legislation but had been actively promoting the Brady Bill before its passage. The passage of the bill did not mark the end of the Hattori's advocacy efforts. They initiated a civil lawsuit against Rodney Pierce, his wife Bonnie, and their home insurance company. They were connected with Charles Moore, a lawyer experienced in handling such cases. Moore had previously represented an English woman involved in a drunk driving accident in Louisiana and had waived his fee in that instance. Moore explained his motivation, stating, "Sometimes you take on cases because you believe it's the right thing to do." He continued to receive inquiries about Yoshi's case over the years, even though it had been approximately 25 years since the incident. Moore had not anticipated any payment, assuming that the insurance company would decline coverage due to the intentional nature of the act. However, to his surprise, the insurer paid out $100,000. During the court proceedings, Judge William Brown declared that self-defense was unjustifiable. He asserted that there was no valid reason for Rodney Pierce to resort to lethal force in order to protect himself. Interestingly, the Hattoris chose not to keep any of the money awarded to them through the lawsuit. Instead, they left the entire sum in the United States to support gun control initiatives. Mieko and Masa have remained actively involved in activism, even after nearly 3 decades since their son's tragic death. They have recently engaged with students who survived the February 2018 Parkland shooting and participated in the March for Our Lives in March 2018 to demonstrate their support for the cause.